The aurora borealis danced across the Norwegian sky, its ethereal light casting strange shadows through the thick pine forest. Isabella Reeves stood on her cabin's porch, breath-forming crystals in the -20-degree air. After 3 years living in this remote wilderness, she thought she'd seen every color the northern lights could produce. But tonight was different. Among the usual greens and purples, there was something else, a pulsing blue light that seemed to move against the aurora's natural flow. Isabella grabbed her binoculars, tracking the anomaly as it grew larger. Her military training kicked in as she analyzed its trajectory. Whatever it was coming down fast and close. Too close. The object cut through the aurora like a knife, trailing what looked like lightning in its wake. As it descended, she could make out a metallic surface reflecting the northern lights, too geometric to be a meteor. The crash shook the ground like an earthquake. Isabella was already moving, grabbing her emergency medical kit, a habit from her days as a combat medic in Afghanistan, and her winter survival pack. She'd seen enough aircraft go down to know that minutes could mean the difference between life and death, assuming anyone survived. The snowmobile roared to life, its headlight cutting through the darkness as she followed the column of steam rising above the tree line. The crash site was about 2 kilometers away, in a natural clearing she often used for stargazing. As she approached, her headlight illuminated a scene that defied explanation. The vessel, if that's what it was, bore no resemblance to any aircraft she'd ever seen. About the size of a small bus, its hull seemed to shift colors like oil on water, even through the patches of flame and scoring from atmospheric entry. The snow around it had melted in a perfect circle, creating a steaming crater that was quickly refreezing in the brutal cold. Isabella killed the snowmobile's engine, listening. In the silence between the crackle of flames and the settling of twisted metal, she heard something. A sound like crystal wind chimes, coming from inside the wreck. Drawing her flashlight, she approached cautiously, her boots crunching on the icy ground. "Hello," she called out, then immediately felt foolish. If this was what she thought it was, there was no reason to expect English would help. The chiming sound came again, more urgent this time, followed by what was unmistakably a cry of pain. That decided it. Whatever was in there was alive and hurting, and that made it her patient. Isabella climbed carefully over the twisted metal, following the sound to what appeared to be a torn open section of hull. Her flashlight beam revealed an interior that seemed to be made of flowing crystal and light, now cracked and dimmed. In what she assumed was the pilot's seat, she found her patient. The being was humanoid but clearly not human, tall and slender, with iridescent skin that seemed to pulse with internal light. Its eyes, large and faceted like diamonds, fixed on her with unmistakable intelligence. A liquid that glowed like starlight seeped from a wound in its side. The alien tried to move and made that crystalline sound again, clearly in agony. Isabella raised her empty hand slowly. "I'm here to help," she said softly, knowing the words meant nothing but hoping her tone would convey her intent. "I'm a medic, a healer." The beam watched her for a long moment, then reached out with a 6-fingered hand. Its skin was cool to the touch and felt like silk over steel. Isabella noticed its breathing was becoming labored, and what she assumed was blood loss was making its skin dim. Time was running out. Using gestures, Isabella indicated her intention to help the alien out of the wreckage. To her surprise, it seemed to understand, giving what looked like a nod. With careful movements, she helped the being extract itself from the twisted crystal seat. It was lighter than she expected, despite being nearly 7 feet tall. Getting it onto her snowmobile proved challenging, but Isabella had plenty of experience moving injured soldiers larger than herself. She secured the alien with cargo straps, trying to be gentle around its wound. The entire time, those diamond eyes watched her with an expression she couldn't read but felt she understood. Fear mixed with desperate hope. The journey back to her cabin was slow and treacherous. The alien's skin provided some illumination, but the wind had picked up, blowing snow across their path. Isabella could feel it shivering against her back, its glow flickering like a dying light bulb. She gunned the engine, pushing the snowmobile as fast as she dared. By the time they reached the cabin, the alien was barely conscious, its skin almost transparent. Isabella half-carried, half-dragged it inside, laying it near the fireplace. The warmth seemed to help. Its breathing became more regular, and some of the color returned to its skin. As Isabella began unpacking her medical supplies, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. The alien was reaching toward her with one hand, while the other clutched what looked like a small crystal at its throat. A hologram sprang to life between them, showing anatomical diagrams that slowly rotated in the air. Isabella leaned forward, fascinated. The images seemed to be responding to her attention, zooming in on areas that corresponded to the alien's injuries. It was trying to help her help it. A smile spread across her face as she realized the implications. Not only was this being intelligent enough to understand its own medical needs, but it was also able to adapt its technology to communicate with her. "Okay," she said, studying the holographic diagrams carefully. "Let's get you patched up. Then we can figure out what brought you to my corner of nowhere." The alien's skin pulsed once with a soft blue light that somehow felt like gratitude. Outside, the aurora continued its dance across the sky, now bearing witness to a moment that would change everything, not just for Isabella and her unexpected patient, but for all of humanity. The first rays of dawn filtered through Isabella's cabin windows, casting prismatic reflections off her alien patient's skin. After a night of intense focus and careful study of the holographic medical guides, she had managed to stabilize the being's condition. The luminous blood had stopped seeping from its wound, now sealed with a combination of traditional sutures and a crystalline substance from a compartment in the alien suit. The being, who had managed to communicate that her name was Naira through a series of gestures and holographic symbols, sat propped against the cabin wall, her diamond-faceted eyes following Isabella's movements with keen interest. The initial fear in those eyes had been replaced by something else: curiosity. Isabella was checking the bandages when Mara reached for her throat crystal again. This time, instead of medical diagrams, the hologram displayed a vast star system. With graceful movements of her six-fingered hand, Nayara zoomed in on a particular planet, a beautiful world of crystal spires and oceans that seemed to glow from within. "That's your home?" Isabella asked, sitting cross-legged in front of the hologram. Nayara's skin pulsed with a soft purple light that Isabella was beginning to associate with affirmation. The alien pointed to herself, then to the planet, then made a flowing gesture with her hands before pointing to Earth's position in the star map. "You're an explorer," Isabella guessed, remembering her own reasons for choosing a life of isolation after leaving the military. "Someone who goes to new places, learns new things." She mimicked looking through binoculars, then pointed to the stars. Nayara's skin rippled with bands of blue and gold, a response Isabella hadn't seen before. The alien adjusted her crystal, and the hologram shifted to show what appeared to be some kind of research vessel, similar to the crashed craft but larger. Nayara pointed to herself again, then made a gesture like she was writing or recording something. "A scientist," Isabella said, nodding. "That makes sense. You're studying us." She pointed to herself, then to the ground. The response was immediate. Nayara's skin flushed with a deep red, and she shook her head in a surprisingly human gesture. She adjusted the hologram again, showing what looked like environmental data. Temperature readings, atmospheric compositions, ocean currents. She pointed to these, then to Earth's position again. "Ah, you're studying the planet itself, not us." Isabella felt relieved, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps because it meant Nayara's presence wasn't part of some larger alien observation program. The aliens' crash had been an accident, not a mission gone wrong. Their attempts at communication were interrupted by a loud rumbling from Nayara's midsection. The alien's skin flushed with embarrassment, a pale pink that made Isabella laugh. Hungry. Yeah, me too. But what do you eat? This proved to be the next challenge. Isabella brought out various foods from her stores, watching Nyara's reactions. The alien seemed fascinated by everything, but showed no interest in eating until Isabella brought out her collection of mineral supplements. Nyara's skin brightened immediately, and she pointed eagerly to the calcium and phosphorus tablets. You eat minerals. Isabella watched in amazement as Nyara carefully examined the supplement bottles, her skin pulsing with different colors as she read the chemical compositions. She selected several tablets, crushing them into a fine powder before consuming them. Her skin brightened noticeably afterward. Over the next few hours, they developed a rudimentary system of communication. Colors, Isabella learned, were as much a part of Nyara's language as sound or gesture. Blue meant understanding or agreement, red was disagreement or warning, gold showed excitement or discovery, and pink seemed to be embarrassment or amusement. The crystal device helped fill in the gaps, providing images and data when colors and gestures weren't enough. By midday, Nyara was strong enough to stand, though she moved carefully. Her height was even more impressive upright. She had to duck to avoid the cabin's ceiling beams. Isabella watched as the alien explored the cabin, with childlike curiosity, examining everything from the wood-burning stove to the solar panels visible through the window. The alien's interest in the solar panels led to another revelation. Using her crystal, Nyara projected an image of her ship's power core, a sophisticated crystal matrix that absorbed and channeled energy. The image shifted to show extensive damage to the core. Without it, the ship couldn't fly, and more importantly, couldn't send any kind of distress signal to her people. "You're stuck here," Isabella said softly, understanding dawning. Nyara's skin dimmed to a deep blue that somehow conveyed sadness. The alien nodded, then pointed to the snow visible through the windows, then to herself, her skin rippling with what looked like a shiver. "Your people didn't plan for you to study cold planets?" Isabella asked, though she knew Nyara couldn't fully understand. "That's why your suit isn't properly insulated." Nyara responded by showing another hologram, her home planet again, but this time focusing on its climate data. It was a warm world, its average temperature similar to Earth's tropics. The crash couldn't have happened in a worse place for a being adapted to such an environment. Isabella stood, decision made. "Well, first things first. We need to get you proper winter gear." She went to her storage chest and pulled out spare winter clothing. Thermal underwear, wool sweaters, her backup winter coat. They would need modification to fit Nyara's tall frame, but they would help. As she helped Nyara put on the layers of Earth clothing, Isabella couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Here she was, dressing an alien scientist in her spare winter clothes, after spending the night using advanced holographic technology to perform xenobiology first aid. If someone had told her this would be her life when she chose to live in isolation, she would have thought they were crazy. Nyara seemed to sense her amusement, her skin taking on that pink hue again. The alien examined herself in Isabella's mirror, turning this way, and that making the puffy winter coat swish around her. She made the chiming sound that Isabella now recognized as laughter. But their moment of levity was interrupted by a distant sound that made both of them freeze, the unmistakable thrum of helicopter rotors. Isabella rushed to the window, her military instincts screaming warnings. In the distance, she could see two black helicopters approaching, their profiles matching no civilian models she knew. Nyara's skin had gone deep red with alarm. The alien didn't need to understand human aircraft to recognize the threat. Something in Isabella's reaction had communicated everything necessary. Their eyes met, and in that moment, both understood that their brief period of peaceful cultural exchange was about to become much more complicated. Isabella quickly began gathering supplies, her mind racing through options. She had chosen this location specifically because it was remote and rarely visited. For helicopters to find them so quickly meant someone had been watching. Either they tracked Nyara's crash, or they'd been monitoring this area already. Either way, they needed to move fast. As she stuffed survival gear into her pack, Isabella glanced at Nyara, who was using her crystal to project what looked like topographical maps of the surrounding area. Even in crisis, the alien scientific nature showed through. She was already analyzing their options, looking for escape routes. Isabella smiled grimly. They might come from different worlds, but in this moment, they were thinking exactly alike. The helicopters were getting closer, and both knew that what happened next would determine not just their own fates, but potentially the future of human-alien relations. The real challenge was just beginning. The wilderness that had once been Isabella's sanctuary now became their shield. She led Nyara through the deep forest, keeping to the densest parts where the helicopter's thermal imaging would have trouble penetrating the thick canopy. The alien moved with surprising grace despite her injury, her natural bioluminescence dimmed to almost nothing. Another survival adaptation Isabella hadn't expected. They had left the cabin just minutes before the helicopters arrived, taking only essential supplies and Nyara's crystal communication device. Through the trees, Isabella could see the aircraft circling her property, their searchlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The sight brought back uncomfortable memories of other pursuits, other conflicts. "We need to get to the emergency shelter," Isabella whispered, more to herself than to Nyara. She had built the hidden bunker during her first year here, part paranoia and part practical preparation for severe weather. Now it seemed her paranoia had been justified. Nyara touched her arm, holding up her crystal device. The hologram it projected showed their surroundings from above, captured during her ship's descent. Isabella watched in amazement as the alien's 6 fingers danced through the projection, adding thermal imaging data that revealed several more heat signatures converging on the area. "Ground teams," Isabella muttered. "They're not taking any chances." She studied the hologram, noting how it showed temperature variations in the landscape. "Can you find any geothermal spots? Hot springs, warm caves?" Nyara's skin pulsed blue with understanding. The hologram shifted, highlighting several natural heat sources in the area. Isabella grinned. The thermal imaging teams would have trouble distinguishing their heat signatures from these natural hotspots. She pointed to one location about 3 kilometers northeast, where her hidden shelter lay near a series of warm springs. They moved as quickly as they dared through the darkness. Isabella's years of military training mixed with her wilderness experience, helping them avoid the search teams that were now spreading through the forest. Nyara proved to be an excellent partner, her ability to see in different light spectrums helping them spot patrols before they got too close. During a brief rest, Nyara used her crystal to share something new. Images of her research mission. Isabella watched, fascinated, as holographic data showed Earth's rapidly changing climate patterns. The alien pointed to several critical indicators, her skin pulsing with urgent reds and yellows. "You were studying climate change," Isabella realized. "That's why you were here." She remembered the environmental data Nyara had shown earlier. "You were trying to help, weren't you?" Nyara's response was to show more data, similar patterns on other worlds, some showing recovery, others showing collapse. Her people had seen this before, had helped other civilizations navigate their environmental challenges. Earth was just the latest in a long line of worlds they were trying to assist, quietly and without interference. The sound of breaking branches interrupted their exchange. Isabella pulled Nyara behind a large fallen tree, just as a beam from a flashlight swept past their position. Voices carried through the darkness. The search teams were getting closer. "Subject is believed to be accompanied by a civilian," a voice crackled over a radio. "Both are to be considered high-value targets. Remember, we need them alive and intact." Isabella felt Nyara tense beside her. The alien skin had taken on a deep crimson hue that Isabella now recognized as fear or warning. Nyara held up her crystal, showing new data, radiation signatures from the search team's equipment. The alien skin rippled with urgent patterns as she pointed to specific readings. "They got something that can track your energy signature," Isabella translated the warning. We need to move. Now. They abandoned stealth for speed, pushing hard through the forest. Isabella's lungs burned in the cold air as they scrambled up steep slopes and crossed icy streams. Nyara's injury was clearly causing her pain, but she kept pace, her determination evident in every movement. The shelter was less than a kilometer away when the first shot rang out, a tranquilizer dart embedding itself in a tree near Isabella's head. She grabbed Nyara's arm, and they ran, no longer trying to hide. Behind them, shouts and the crash of pursuit echoed through the trees. They'd reached the shelter's hidden entrance as the sun began to rise. Isabella quickly keyed in the access code, blessing her past self for installing the reinforced door. As they slipped inside, she could hear the search teams converging on their position. The shelter was small but well-equipped. Food, water, medical supplies, and most importantly, several feet of earth and metal between them and any scanning equipment. As Isabella secured the entrance, Nyara was already examining the shelter's construction, her crystal projecting analysis of its composition. "It won't hide us forever," Isabella said, checking their supplies. "But it'll give us time to think." Nyara's response was unexpected. Instead of showing more tactical data, her crystal projected an image of her ship, specifically its communications array. The alien pointed to the crystal she wore, then to the array, making a connection gesture. "Your crystal can be modified to send a signal?" Isabella asked. Nyara's skin pulsed blue in confirmation, but then shifted to a worried purple as she pointed to the shelter's ceiling, then made a gesture indicating power or energy. "You need more power than it currently has," Isabella translated. "And using it might give away our position." Nyara nodded, her expression somehow conveying both hope and concern despite her alien features. They were interrupted by a voice from outside, amplified by speakers. "Dr. Isabella Reeves, this is Colonel Marcus Ward of the Strategic Scientific Operations Division. We know you're in there. We know what you're protecting. Let's talk about this professionally." Isabella's blood ran cold. She hadn't heard that voice in years, not since Afghanistan, not since the incident that had driven her to seek isolation in the first place. Of course it would be him. Of course he would be the one to find them. Nyara must have sensed her distress. The alien placed a gentle six-fingered hand on her shoulder, her skin glowing with warm, comforting colors. In that touch, Isabella felt understanding. Whatever had happened in her past, whatever brought her here, Nyara accepted it without judgment. Isabella took a deep breath, centering herself. They had decisions to make. Try to contact Nyara's people and risk immediate detection, or play for time and hope another opportunity would present itself. Either way, they needed to act soon. The shelter was secure, but they were still trapped. Outside, Ward's voice came again. "You have 1 hour to respond, Doctor. After that, we do this the hard way." Isabella looked at Nyara, saw the same determination in those crystalline eyes that she felt in her own heart. They had found trust in their differences, strength in their shared purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The real question was, what would cost more? Keeping Nyara's presence a secret or letting her knowledge become a weapon in the wrong hands? Inside the shelter, time seemed to move differently. Isabella sat cross-legged on the floor, watching Nyara work with her crystal device. The alien's long fingers moved with precision, making adjustments too subtle for human eyes to follow. The crystal itself had been partially disassembled, its inner workings casting prismatic patterns on the shelter's walls. 40 minutes remaining, Dr. Reeves. Ward's voice penetrated their sanctuary. "I know why you ran from the program. I know what you saw in Afghanistan. But this is different. This is bigger than your conscience." Isabella's hands clenched involuntarily. Nyara paused in her work, her skin shifting to a questioning shade of violet. The alien had proven remarkably perceptive about human emotions, and now she clearly sensed there was more to Isabella's past than she had shared. "I was part of a military medical research program," Isabella explained, knowing Nyara might not understand the words but would grasp the emotion behind them. We were supposed to be developing treatments for combat injuries. But Ward, he had other ideas. He wanted to weaponize everything we discovered, turn healing into hurting. Nyara's skin pulsed with deep red, anger or outrage. The alien adjusted her crystal, projecting an image that made Isabella's breath catch. It showed another world, one where crystal spires lay shattered, oceans dulled to muddy gray, a civilization that had destroyed itself through warfare and environmental collapse. "You've seen it before," Isabella whispered. "That's why you study worlds like Earth. You're trying to prevent this from happening again." The alien nodded, her skin shifting to softer, sadder colors. She showed more images, other worlds where her people had shared their knowledge, and the different outcomes that followed. Some flourished, using the technology for healing and growth. Others turned it to destruction, despite all warnings and precautions. "That's why you work in secret," Isabella realized. "You let each civilization choose its own path." She laughed bitterly. And now Ward wants to force that choice. Nyara's response was to show a new hologram, a technical diagram of her crystal device. Isabella leaned closer, understanding dawning as she recognized the modifications the alien had been making. The crystal wasn't just a communication device, it was a repository of knowledge. Nyara had been preparing it to transmit not just a distress signal, but a choice. 30 minutes, Doctor," Ward called. "We've detected energy signatures in there. Whatever you're planning, it won't work." This facility was designed to contain and study exactly these kinds of phenomena. Isabella's eyes widened. "This isn't just a shelter anymore, is it? They built something around us while we were hiding." She looked at Nyara. "That's why you've been so focused on the shelter's composition. You knew." Nyara's skin flickered with confirmation. She projected a structural analysis of their surroundings, layers of specialized materials designed to contain and study alien technology. They weren't just surrounded, they were in a sophisticated trap. But there was something else in Nyara's expression, a glimmer of what Isabella could only describe as hope. The alien pointed to the crystal, then to Isabella, then made a gesture encompassing everything around them. "You're saying we can use their containment against them?" Isabella studied the holographic diagrams more carefully. "The energy they're trying to contain. We could redirect it, couldn't we?" Nyara's skin brightened with excitement. She showed a simulation of what would happen. The containment field would amplify her crystal signal, turning their prison into a massive transmitter. But there was a catch, revealed in the next set of data she displayed. The power surge would be massive, devastating to anything nearby. 20 minutes, Doctor. We're preparing to breach." Isabella stood, pacing the small space. "If we do this, we don't just risk ourselves. Anyone within range." She trailed off, remembering faces from her past, lives lost to similar choices. There has to be another way. Nyara's response was gentle but firm. She showed one final image, Earth, but not as it was. The hologram displayed two possible futures, one where humanity struggled alone with its mounting crisis, and another where it moved forward with the knowledge to heal its wounds, both environmental and social. "You're letting me choose," Isabella realized. "Not Ward, not your people. Me." The alien's skin pulsed with warm, trusting colors. She held out the crystal, now modified and humming with potential energy. In her other hand, she projected a small hologram of the facility's surroundings, showing that most of Ward's people had pulled back to a safe distance. They were expecting a containment breach, not a transmission. 10 minutes. Final warning. Isabella took the crystal, feeling its warmth pulsing in sync with Nyara's bioluminescence. "Ward was right about one thing," she said quietly. "This is bigger than my conscience. It's about all of us." She looked at Nyara, seeing in those crystalline eyes the same dedication to healing that had drawn her to medicine in the first place. Whatever happened next would change everything. But then, everything important always did. The sound of drilling began above them. Time had run out. Isabella held up the crystal, meeting Mayara's gaze. The alien's skin glowed with all the colors of trust, hope, and possibility. Together, they reached for the activation sequence, knowing that in moments, the choice would be made. Not just for them, but for everyone. The crystal began to pulse with building energy, and the future rushed to meet them. The world exploded in light. The crystal's energy, amplified by the containment field, erupted in a cascade of colors no human eye had ever seen. Isabella felt Mayara's six-fingered hand grip hers as the power surged through the shelter, transforming their prison into a beacon that reached for the stars. The drilling stopped. Outside, alarms blared and voices shouted in confusion. Isabella could hear Ward barking orders, trying to maintain control of a situation that had already spiraled far beyond his grasp. The containment field, designed to trap energy, was now channeling it skyward in a pillar of light visible for miles. But something else was happening too. As the crystal pulsed between them, Isabella began to understand. The transmission wasn't just a distress signal, it was something far more profound. Through the crystal's power, she could see what Mayara saw, feel what she felt. Knowledge flowed between them, not just scientific data, but understanding. "This is what you really came to share," Isabella whispered, watching as images of healing and renewal filled her mind. She saw techniques for environmental restoration, medical breakthroughs, sustainable energy systems, but more importantly, she saw the wisdom behind their use, the responsibility that came with such knowledge. Mayara's skin rippled with affirmation, her colors shifting through patterns that Isabella now understood as clearly as spoken words. This was her people's true mission, not to simply give technology to other civilizations, but to find those individuals who would understand its proper use, to create bridges between worlds, one connection at a time. The shelter's door burst open, Ward leading a team in protective suits. They froze at the sight before them, human and alien, hands clasped, surrounded by a swirling vortex of light and information. Their weapons dropped slowly as the crystal's energy touched them too, sharing glimpses of possibility. "My God," Ward breathed, his hardened military facade cracking as understanding washed over him. "This is what you were protecting. Not just the alien, the choice." Isabella met his gaze steadily. "There's always a choice, Colonel. Between fear and hope. Between weapons and healing." She gestured to the flowing data around them. "Look at what we could become if we choose right." The crystal's light intensified, and with it came a new sensation, a response from above. Mayara's skin blazed with joy as she recognized the signal. Her people had received the transmission. They were coming, not with warships or demands, but with an offer of partnership. "They'll be here within days," Isabella translated the alien's excited colors. "Not to take over, not to fix everything for us, but to show us how to fix things ourselves." She looked at Ward. "The question is, are we ready?" The colonel stood silent for a long moment, the weight of decades of military conditioning warring with the vision of possibility before him. Finally, he reached up and removed his protective helmet. "I've spent my entire career preparing for threats from above," he said quietly. "Never once considered they might come offering hope instead." He straightened, decision made. "What do you need from us?" The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The facility, once a trap, became a coordination center. Ward's security teams shifted from containment to protection as news of the contact spread through carefully chosen channels. Mayara worked tirelessly, using her crystal to begin sharing the most immediately vital information, starting with environmental restoration techniques that could be implemented right away. Isabella found herself in a new role, bridging the gap between military precision and alien wisdom. Her medical background helped her translate complex biological concepts, while her experience with Ward's organization helped her navigate the political complexities that arose. As dawn broke the following day, Isabella stood with Mayara on a hilltop overlooking the facility. The alien's skin glowed with contentment as she projected an image of her approaching people, not a military fleet, but a delegation of scientists and healers. "It won't be easy," Isabella said, watching preparations below. "Change never is. There will be those who resist, who want to use this knowledge for power rather than progress." Nyara's skin shifted through understanding colors. She showed an image of her own world's history, the struggles they had faced, the choices that had led them to become who they were. Change had not come easily to them either, but they had persevered. The crystal at Nyara's throat pulsed gently, sharing one final vision. Earth, transformed not by alien technology, but by human hands guided by shared wisdom. Cities powered by clean energy, oceans healing, forests regenerating. A future built on cooperation rather than conflict. A partnership. Isabella smiled, understanding. Not saviors and saved, but equals learning from each other. Nyara's skin glowed with warm approval. She raised her hand to the horizon, where the first rays of sun were painting the sky in colors that seemed brighter somehow, more full of promise. The alien's gesture encompassed everything. The facility below, the wilderness around them, the sky above, and all the possibility that lay between. Isabella nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. This was more than first contact, more than a scientific exchange. This was a new beginning, not just for her or for humanity, but for the very idea of what was possible when fear gave way to hope. In the distance, helicopters approached, not military this time, but media. The world was about to change forever. But as Isabella stood beside her alien friend, watching the sun rise on this new era, she knew they had made the right choice. After all, some wounds could only be healed together. The crystal pulsed one final time, its light merging with the dawn, and Earth took its first steps into a future full of possibilities none had imagined possible. Not an ending, but a beginning, one that would be written together, in colors both human and alien eyes could see.